Sup Gloomers, today we're going to be doing another Frosthaven class guide, and this time the Blink Blade. The Blink Blade is a medium health mercenary with a hand size of 10, which is a bit deceptive because a lot of times classes that play like this, they tend to have more moderate turns, but the Blink Blade definitely has a lot of burst and high damage potential that you see with some of the card weighting that you see in the 9 card classes. So, and we're going to be talking about that shortly. But the biggest point of emphasis that the Blink Blade has is they have this time token, and they'll go fast and slow on every turn, and ultimately that dictates how they play. Unlike other classes who can go fast or slow at a whim, you now have a resource that controls whether you can go fast or slow, and we'll get into the details of that and how to master the Blink Blade in this video. Remember to like if you enjoyed this content, and be sure to subscribe and hit that bell if you want to be notified of everything Frosthaven. Join our Patreon if you want early access to videos and want to support our channel. It really helps. So the biggest thing to talk about for the Blink Blade is the time tokens. Time tokens you have between 0 and 5, although it's kind of deceptive because you're usually going to be bouncing between 0 and 2 time tokens. There's ways to get higher than that, but we'll get to those later once we get to those cards. Every time you go slow, you gain a time token. Every time you go fast, you lose a time token. You declare whether you're going fast or going slow when you do end up picking your cards. Before you play them, you have to announce it, and that's what you end up going with. The initiatives for fast cards bounce between 1 and 69, nice, and the initiatives for slow bounce between 31 and 99. This should be pretty notable. There's just a 30-point difference between every card. As a result, even your fastest card played while in slow mode can only go as fast as 31, whereas even if you're going slow on the Blink Blade, the worst you can go is 69. Because of these, the Blink Blade has quite a breadth of control, and out of all the classes has the ability to go the earliest, even better than the Scoundrel. Unfortunately though, it doesn't reliably have the ability to go faster than Scoundrel because you have to balance it out. And so the fast turns end up being higher mobility, usually more damage, more targets, or payoffs like that. And the slow turns aren't necessarily bad. They're certainly lower impact, but you'll usually have different triggers, like you'll be able to possibly regenerate, ward, sometimes heal more, or muddle enemies. Sometimes you'll have slow turns where you will have the ability to like burst out movement, but then you immobilize yourself, so even on your next turn, you'll be suffering some consequences which you can play around. The Blink Blade also has a very diverse toolkit, being able to attack many times, a lot, being able to pierce, being able to wound, being able to go invisible, non-lost invisibility at level 1, which is hard to find in Frosthaven amongst all the classes. Between this toolkit, you'll have a lot of burst removal, and I'm going to be actually dividing this into 2, potentially 3 build paths. There's another build path that gets introduced later that I will be discussing roughly around level 4. It's the Slow Blade, which was designed by Descent. I personally haven't played that class. However, I do enjoy his thoughts on it, so I will put those in the guide. If you want to read Descent's whole guide, I will include a link in the description. The main builds I'll primarily be going over is what I call a tempo build, and as well as a burst build. Anyone who's played certain like CCGs will know the difference between like tempo and burst. Tempo being a controlled resource gain, and burst being able to save up and then do as much impact within a short window of time as possible. Now you're always in general going to have some of those that capacity of burst, except the Slow Blade, which has a little bit more control. But all of these builds will have to play around the fact that there are slow, fast, and definitely the 2 main builds will be doing the payoffs on the fast turns. Some Gloomhaven veterans might go, oh, well, this is just initiative weaving. This isn't even that hard. But it's controlled and forced initiative weaving. You'll have it tied to a resource, and your effects of your cards change dramatically with whether you're going fast or slow. Because sometimes you'll be like, hey, I'm going to go slow and then hit this guy really hard. But a lot of times the Blink Blade will be, I'm going to go slow and I might make it over there. Like even the Brute has the ability to go really slow, and then with just one of the starting items do like move 6, attack 6 at level 1. The Blink Blade isn't going to be able to pull anything like off while going late in the round. So you have to learn how to best control the tempo of the Blink Blade. We're going to be going over some, as we go through them card by card, as well as getting to perks later, we'll be going over, first off, the amazing attack modifier deck, because you have a lot of +2s, which a lot of the Blink Blade's attacks are like weaker numbers, but because the attack modifier deck is so strong, it actually doesn't even matter as much as you'd expect. But the biggest problem you're going to have is being able to have the impact turns when you need them, and being able to, first off, protect yourself. So a big problem that the Blink Blade has is it does have, although it does have a bit of healing and some, like, you know, regenerate and whatnot, it doesn't actually have as much defense as other classes, but it has a lot of mobility. Now, some people might be able to say, hey, I'm going to be able to get all the way over there and like hit that guy. And you can use your mobility for that, but a lot of times you're going to want to be using your mobility to get in and get out, because sometimes just positioning is going to win you that. And that's the biggest part of the Blink Blade, is knowing when to rush in and knowing when to pull, knowing when to go in and knowing when to withdraw, and using your invisibility and your fast and slow tactically. So I'm going to go through this card by card and pitch what all the uses for what those are. I'll be going over a build on what cards you'll be taking for every build at every level, and I'll be discussing for the Tempo and Nova builds, as well as I'll be going over the slow build guide. I want to also point out that although the slow build isn't really viable until about level 4, it does affect, you can't just like play as another class and do it, because the cards that you select 2 through 4 do build up to that point, so it is its own separate build. So let's get into the cards. Blurry Jab, initiative 20 and 50 respectively, and it's an attack 4 with wound that gives you an experience, which is fantastic, or it's an attack 2 with muddle. Now, the bottom on the other hand is a move 5, which is nice, or a move 2 and then an adjacent enemy suffers 1 damage. Here's the part I really like about this card, is it shows off how each fast and slow does something different. Now, the slow mode has a move 2 and an attack 2. That's not necessarily great, but the bottom does allow you to inflict direct damage if you can get to an enemy because you're not so terribly far away from them. And direct damage is very potent, and the top half still does muddle, so if you don't have the capacity to actually produce a powerful attack, you can at least give the opponent disadvantage. On the contrary, the fast side is just straight up move 5 or attack 4 wound, gain an experience. Both of those are just wonderful. So this is kind of your one of your best cards that you'll be using for a while. Personally, although I know you clearly love seeing like big burst move in a 5, the attack 4 wound is incredibly powerful within Frosthaven, especially when you have some of the big health creatures like you have in the Algox, especially early on. And given this is a starter, you're going to be fighting those pretty heavily in the first part of the campaign, that being able to punch through a good amount of damage while also wounding them is very potent. But regardless, it doesn't matter which version of the card, they all have their purposes. Especially when you start fighting shielded enemies, the bottom of this, while slow, being able to move and then do a direct damage while also doing a still useful top half is very valuable. Twin Strike. So this one does have a lot going on, but while in fast mode, you attack 2, move 2, attack 3. You actually have to do the move to get the experience. Now you can always move out and move back in. That still counts as a move, so if you like the spot you're in. In a slow mode, it's an attack 1 and then an attack 2 with no movement and no experience. This ends up being one of your best source of actual burst, and this is one of the things where if you have the ability to poison enemies, or you have, like, for example, a Bone Shaper in your party who's poisoned them, this one does so much if you have the capacity for that. Being able to turn an attack 2 and attack 3 into an attack 3 and an attack 4 allows you to take down like pesky Algox or other large health enemies much more swiftly. And even then, while in slow, it's not even that bad with an attack 1 and attack 2, although personally I don't like using it for that, because the bottom half, while fast and slow, both have incredible purposes. So while slow, the bottom half is a mere move 1, heal 2 self, and infuse Earth. Earth will only be useful for a couple of your allies. Bone Shaper could potentially use it, so if you have that as an ally, that's nice. But ultimately, move 1, heal 2 self is still pretty decent, especially for a slow half turn. The bottom, on the other hand, is great for fast. And you'll begin to notice that this is almost like analyzing 2 cards at once for every card. So that's going to be a trend throughout the whole video. So I'm sorry if that ends up taking up a lot of time. But it's move 3, and then all of your attacks this round gain Pierce 2, Infuse Wind. Wind isn't super useful. I mean, if you have a Banner Spear, it does sometimes help them out, but most of the time you're going to be specifically using this to take out some shielded enemies, and boy are the shielded enemies in Frosthaven particularly annoying. So one of the things I particularly enjoy about this is even if you can't use like the attack 2, attack 3 because the enemy's shielded, like, oh no, they have shield 2, so this is gonna like do nothing. The bottom is useful. So they both halves on this, while fast, have really good purposes. So one of them is good against enemies that don't have shield, and the bottom's really good against enemies that do have shield. So Twin Strike ends up being, also not only that, but being able to move between the attacks, especially if you just want to finish off one enemy, move, and then do the bigger attack on another enemy. That's huge. Alternatively, being able to tag an enemy and then move out if you know that they're not going to be able to tap you back due to the movement. Keep in mind, that's some useful stuff. I do want to emphasize the heal on bottom is actually a little, is very strong, because you will need to be healing yourself a bit, because there are times where you'll find yourself out of position. So don't underrate using the bottom of this while slow to get some recovery, because the last thing you want to do is start losing cards. Sap speed. So the initiative's 45 and 75. So, well, while slow, see, this one's actually not even a bad card while slow. It's an attack 2 in a cone. Now, of course, 2 hex attack 2s are very bad and behind the curve, even by Gloomhaven standards. Frosthaven has a little bit of a better curve in terms of baseline non-loss level 1 cards, but this is worse than the Brute. However, it's better than the Brute if you're fast. So it's an attack 3 on both targets with advantage and an experience. It's really just the Brute card plus advantage, but getting advantage on 2 attack 3s is amazing. Again, this is another one of those where you have to have enemies in the right position to take advantage of this, but if you do have 2 attack 3s with advantage lined up, you usually, especially at low levels, you take that. Even then, later levels is still strong. The bottom half, you can immobilize while fast 3 adjacent enemies, which is really strong, right? Unfortunately though, you have to go middle of the round or have another initiative that better pairs with them, and then you have to have some sort of top half that moves you out of the way, or otherwise they're just immobilized next to you. They're still going to be in range for anything, even ranged attacks, but you can't immobilize them and force them to attack with disadvantage, which isn't a bad plan. Or you'll have to do a top half like Twin Strike that moves you out of the way. So you'll have to use that a little bit more creatively to immobilize multiple opponents and then actually take advantage of that. The bottom half, on the other hand, while slow, does actually give you the ability to ignore slow effects of your other actions this turn. So if you do start off with this by immobilize one guy, you can use the top half as just a basic thing without the slow penalties. Now this doesn't give you the fast bonuses. So we just talked about Twin Strike. So if you play Sap Speed and Twin Strike while slow, you can use the bottom half to immobilize an enemy, and then you do an attack 2 and attack 3, no longer suffering the attack penalties on them, but it doesn't give you the move 2. So just keep that in mind, that it does give you some semi-unique cards as a result due to ignoring specific effects. Kinetic Transfer. Now this is a very interesting card. It's got a lot going on. So 36 and 66 on the initiatives. So let's just start looking at the top half. So the top is a move 1, attack 2 at range 2, and infuse ice if you're slow. So move 1, attack 2, range 2, infuse ice. But notice the plus range symbol. It is normally a melee attack. Anytime you see a plus range symbol, it does convert it to a ranged attack. So this attack is very much not a melee attack while slow. I know some people have asked, is this a melee attack that's performed at 1 additional hex? It will specifically say target enemies that are within 2 hexes rather than +1 range. Once there's a range icon, it's a ranged ability. While fast though, it's move 2, attack 2, push 3, infuse fire. Fire and ice will help, like for example, if you have a Geminate in your party, but move 2, attack 2, push 3 is very good if you have like trap setup. There's a lot of potential here, but even while slow, attack 2 at range 2 is actually one of the better tops you have, including the fact that you still have move 1, so you have some ability to like hit enemies that are 3 away. The bottom half is something I absolutely love for either of them, because even then, while slow, the bottom is a move 3. You don't have a lot of you usually have move 1 or move 2 with cool other effects like muddle or heal. but not a lot of movement. So if you do need to move pretty quickly while slow, you either have to suffer penalties, use items, or hey, kinetic transfer is straight up just a move 3. While fast though, kinetic transfer is amazing. Move 4, and then everyone, allies and enemies, all suffer 1 damage. Reminds me of like the Craghart's Rumbling Advance, but without Earth and move 4 instead of move 2. As a result, I love Rumbling Advance, and kinetic transfer is no exception. This card does so much, and it's definitely one of the... I lean more towards using the bottom, but the top obviously has its uses. The push is situationally incredibly powerful. The ranged attack is something you're going to sometimes need, and the bottom being able to burst enemies by just doing a little bit of damage, especially that breaks through 3 shields, as well as having a move 4 is strong and something you should... I mean, I always just love straight up move 4, period, so that's great. Additionally, the bottom does have the ability to pitch a time token, whether you're going fast or slow, to say, target all adjacent enemies, and then push 3 on them. This is nice because there are situations where you will want to, and I know burning a time token's huge, but sometimes burning a time token to like knock enemy through, sometimes you get stun traps, or like being able to move, hit an enemy, and then like being able to push enemies through hazards or traps that ends up killing them. Usually like, hey, do you want to trade a time token to kill an enemy? There's a fair bit of time, like, and not burn a turn. There's plenty of times where you will take that. Now it's harder to use while fast because you'll need to burn up 2 tokens, burn 1 to go fast, and then burn 1 to push. So it's a little bit harder to use while fast. It's easier to use while slow, but it's an option. You don't have to use that. So there's going to be several situations where you just want to move 4, or just want to move 4 and do 1 damage. It's good. Overdrive. Now this is actually a top I really love. So permanently while going slow, you're shielded 1, and permanently while going fast, you have jump on all your movement. Keep in mind though, this is not like by the time your turn runs around, you get it. This is just period while it's active. Of course, you still have to put it into play, so if you're like, play it while slow and play this at initiative 90, you don't get shield until this is put in play, but once it's in play, it's in play. So it's forever while it's going on. So let's say you do like long rest and you're now going slow at initiative 99. And you do actually have to declare while long resting if you're going fast or slow. There's very few situations where you want a long rest while fast, but this is one of those. For example, if you long rest while fast, you're still at initiative 99, by the way. But if someone grants you a movement, it gives you jump. Of course, you have to spend a token while fast. So there's very, very, very few situations where you want a long rest while that. And there's very few situations where it would pay off. But again, don't want to say none. However, this does say, while slow, you have permanent shield. As soon as those cards are revealed, you declare slow, you have shield. So it doesn't matter how late in the round you're going, you have that protection. That really helps out a lot because, especially while slow, that's usually when you get caught out of position, and sometimes there's like an oops, or like you're learning new monster abilities and didn't know they had this ability to go to like initiative 9. Oh no. But at the very least, getting shield 1 against all these attacks might lessen the blow. The bottom hand, on the other hand, is really nice. First off, because, target muddle all enemies within range 2 is nice. But then while slow, it's muddle all enemies while in range 3. So overdrive is actually really good while slow. The bottom, on the other hand, saying that all your attacks who are targeting muddled enemies don't retaliate against you. So you can use this to like muddle enemies and then like slap them, especially some of those that like have retaliate too. If you're like, I was gonna attack them twice, and like, well, attack 2, attack 3, which is normally good. But if you're getting retaliated on twice, suffering 4 damage to do an attack 2 and attack 3 may seem less desirable. But now saying like, all right, I'm gonna attack 2, attack 3, muddle you, and not get retaliated on, very strong. This is not necessarily a must take in every situation, but it's a strong card that I would strongly consider everyone to consider bringing should the scenario feel like it's useful. I don't necessarily consider this mandatory. I know a lot of people, there was some discussion early on about overdrive being like your mandatory loss because you get this huge bonus while slow or fast. I do like the fast bonus, but a lot of times while slow, you want to be in the right position that you aren't being caught out of position. So hopefully you won't even have to use the top that much. I still like it, but I consider it more of a situational card than a must take. Power Leak, initiative 17 and 47. So let's talk about the slow part first. First, you attack 4 and muddle yourself. And The model, like doing an attack 4 with disadvantage isn't super great, but at least it's an attack 4 while slow. The bottom hand, on the other hand, is no matter what, fast or slow is a loss. Move 3, which is pretty good move 3 is pretty good for slow, but then you heal 2 yourself and everyone next to you. That's actually a pretty significant heal, especially if you have a whole group up. So on command, you can use it pretty well, but I personally don't like this as a slow for initiative because 47 is too middling to be particularly effective. An attack 4. Anyway, I'm not a big fan of this while slow. Just want to point that out there. The bottom are, but while fast, on initiative 17, first off, initiative 17 is very good. It's not quite the initiative 15, 14 undercut I like, but it's still pretty close because it'll undercut basically almost every other card. Move 7 is something you might need on command. Like, sometimes some of the other starters had some like moves, move 6s and with losses. It's just situational. But for this card, the top while fast is mwah. If you do not have poison, okay, gain poison and an experience, but also target another enemy. So this means that while fast, attack 4 and attack 4 if you're fast and don't have poison. You do, of course, poison yourself in the process, but 2 attack 4s on a non-lost top is so huge, especially on initiative 17. So this will be one of your best source of burst multi-target damage at level 1, and I strongly consider taking it. As a result, since you will be probably poisoning yourself, taking some cards that will be able to heal you, like the Amulet of Life, or using some of the bottom halves that said, hey, use this like heal on yourself. This is one of the main reasons why, because you don't want to, first off, leave yourself poisoned, which then leaves yourself vulnerable to attacks, and you'll leave yourself more vulnerable to attacks when you do get hit, and you're not super tough, so you might actually take a lot more damage, at least 1, but if you attack multiple times, that adds up. But also it prevents Power Leak from triggering again, and you'll want to be using this more often. So consider bringing the heals for this reason, if only to power this card. Hit and Run. So Hit and Run is this card, I do like the top version of this for fast because attack 3, immobilize, move 2, gaining experience is really good. Because if you've set yourself up with a slow turn, moved a little bit into position on the next thing, or even just move in with a move, do something, hit them and move out, you can effectively stun most enemies with this fashion. That's fantastic. It still immobilizes while slow, but you'll have to be in position to do it, so that you can always like attack 2, immobilize, and move out. But while slow, chances are your initiative's probably not going fast enough to move out in time, so I just kind of want to caution using that with slow. But even then, the initiative isn't super great because 71 isn't necessarily the best while slow, but 41 is certainly not the best while fast. So although I do like that aspect of the card, I think the actual applications of it end up being a little bit weakened as a result of its initiative. The bottom half is fairly conditional in my opinion. I'm not as sold about it, but on your next 5 attack actions while fast actions, perform a move 3 at the end of the action. Free move 3s is fantastic, but it gives you 2 experience, it's a loss, and on a class set, I don't know. Some scenarios do require specific positional requirements, and I know it seems like, oh, you can like do like a bunch of bottoms and like attack, and then get out, and it says a 3 free get outs, and it seems that way, but the actual application usually isn't that, because you usually have enough mobility as is to be able to protect yourself. To not necessarily have to burn a loss. You can, however, put this into play while slow and then get the benefit while fast. So there's some cool applications here, and especially for some scenarios where you do need to get out fast or be able to zip in, zip out. There's absolutely uses for it, but I'm more sold on the top half. Ultimately, this card's pretty decent, but it's usually the top half while fast that's really only got my attention. Drive Recharge. This is a card I really like because, first off, Initiative 99 while slow basically means if you need to go after all enemies with slow, you can guarantee it. So the bottom half, heal 2 self, which is nice. Again, you need that. But also regenerate if you're going slow, and no benefit if you're going fast. So Drive Recharge is fantastic for taking a slow turn to recover, especially if you need to Drive Recharge long rest. You could potentially be like, I'm out of time, then heal a lot, and then come out of that long rest with 2 time tokens. The bottom of Drive Recharge ends up being really good if you can time your rest cycle with that. The top is one of those big boosts. I actually remember the first version of Drive Recharge where it had no loss and no other effects, just gain a time token with no loss. That was broken. It was so bad. Everyone always took it, and it was like almost like a turn 1 setup thing, and then 3 fast turns in a row. It became, people just started playing predictably the same, and it kind of sucked. So this is one of the ways you're going to be able to take a lot of turns and get those above. You know how I said like you only stay between 0 and 2? Well, for time tokens, if you ever are slow and then declare slow while you're at 2, you don't go to 3, you stay at 2. The only way to get above 2 is to play cards that give you time tokens, like this one. So this one will give you 2 time tokens, and this can violate the 2 rule, and the maximum for time tokens period is 5. So if you do this while at, like, let's say you are at 1 time token and you go slow, boom, going slow brings you to 2. You play the top of Drive Recharge, boom, that's 4. You can take 4 fast turns in a row. This is really good for setting up a room, especially because it blesses you and it wards you. So you'll be able to mitigate maybe a little bit of damage, a couple. Bless might be able to draw it out and really set up that big turn, especially if you're about to kick in the door. Especially the late initiative on this, you might be able to pair it with some movement, get in there, and go fast the next round. I really like this 4 setup, especially around doors. Doors are some of the most dangerous parts of Gloomhaven. I know, right? It's just very strange because like you don't know what's in there. This is one way to just really say, hey, I want to set up and have a very, very powerful last room or next room. This is a good loss to set for that. And the bottom's really good for slow turns in the interim. Cascading reaction. So this top half while fast is ridiculous. I've never seen the top half played while slow, and I don't think I ever will. Attack 3, gain an experience, wound. Move 3, attack 3, gain an experience, wound. Oh, it's just so fun. First off, being able to just do the attack, move, attack, and then still have the bottom. You could potentially do go in very late, get in, attack 3, hit and move another here, attack 3, then play another bottom, move out, and then watch enemies try to catch up to you while they're now bleeding out. And then help the rest of your group by coming back. This has actually been pretty effective on some of the bigger scenarios, or scenarios where you have to like funnel things in and just move in and out, especially if you have the ability to jump, either by playing Winged Boots or Overdrive. I've seen this to great effect. This is one of my favorite tops, but it's a loss. So remember, if I love situational top losses, we better have a pretty good bottom. And guess what it is? It's a move 3 while slow. Period. Ignore everything else. While slow, it's a move 3. Great. While fast, it's a move 4. See, both of those are just fantastic. It doesn't even matter. Although the rest of the thing is all allies get +1 to their move abilities when they move from a hex adjacent to you to not. So move 4 with a potential bonus rider. Honestly, I've not had that happen as much, but it is funny. I've had the bottom of that used as a way to get a Bone Shaper summons into position. So it's not entirely never used for that, but the initiative 19 while fast, while also with the move 4, ends up being incredibly powerful while holding on to a top loss that is incredibly powerful. This is a very valuable card, and it's something that you will use for quite a bit in your early career as a Blink Blade. Temporal displacement. This is important because it's like, hey, it's a bottom attack. The interesting part, so 44 and 74 is not great, but so it's an attack 2 while slow, which is not bad actually, and attack 3 at range 3 while fast. Ignore the initiative, use a different card with it because 44 is usually not the best thing you want to do, but attack 3 range 3, fantastic. The top half is a, top loot, which if you're going slow, honestly, just move and top loot is a really good turn. And you need to bring loots because rebuilding Frosthaven is critical. So use this during your downtime, scoop some loot up, get into position, loot. Alternatively, while fast, it does give you a move to loot, and then you still have the bottom half to work with. Depending on like if the scenario is winding down and whatnot, this can be really good. But even then, if you're not looting, you have a bottom attack with this. This ends up being a very powerful and mandatory card as a result. All right, so now we're getting into level X cards. So experimental adjustment is I don't consider it very Xy. I consider this to be better than some of those, like whenever I said like, hey, this is conditional or maybe consider bringing this, this is one of the cards you bring instead. So first off, mandatory damage to self. So the fact that all the other cards usually don't have very many drawbacks and this one says damage to self means that there better be a very good payoff. And the card's very different depending on if you're going fast or slow. The 12 and 42. 12 initiative is the undercut you need. It is so terribly important to have that, especially with the effect on the fast side. We'll get to that shortly, but 12 and 42 is incredibly important. So let's go to the slow side first just to do a quick analysis. First off, immobilize every enemy with a range 2 and muddle every enemy with a range 2. It's not necessarily bad, but there are situations where you can use this to incredible effects to go in late if you have a different card. Go in late, immobilize, muddle a bunch of enemies, and then the next turn during your fast, have more control over what enemies are going to be able to reach you. Keep in mind, you'll need to pair this when you know enemies like more reliably have ranged attacks or only very weak or low ranged attack, or guards for 7 abilities that trigger on melee and 1 on range. So guards this is particularly effective against, but against archers, due to their general range of like between 3 and 5, giving them all a disadvantage might be nice, but the other part of it's generally better. So the idea of like when to use this as a fast or slow card is significant. The bottom is a move 4 while slow, but it does immobilize you. So it immobilizes you for the rest of the remaining round and then for your entire next turn. This isn't bad if you need to move 4 while slow, get in position, and then long rest, because the immobilize will fall off during your long rest. So that's a good use for it while slow, just a heads up. While fast, the bottom move to loot 1 on a bottom is still very good, so I consider that, but the top half is incredible while fast, and that's the main application I like about this. First off, the damage to self is significant, but then all enemies within range 2 suffer 1 damage. This ignores shields and tickles everyone a little bit, but also invisible self on you. So especially if you're down to no time tokens, consider going like particularly late, especially if you have like the ability to, you know, drive recharge to heal to self, regenerate on the next turn so you now can recover the damage you took from this. Stay invisible so you're not attacked. You can position yourself in a spot where enemies will find you to be annoying, or like be next to an ally, so now the enemies have to move around you all invisible, and then you'll be perfectly positioned to take a fast turn and just burst out the enemies that you just did 1 damage to, and hopefully some of your allies just did some follow up on. Experimental adjustment I consider to be not an X card, but more of a mandatory card, so strongly take this. The initiative 12 is something you'll need, and non-loss invisibility, plus potentially having loot or burst movement while slow that you can lead into a rest. It has a lot of tools it can do. You'll need to keep a lot of these in mind, but keep in mind, because it can do all of these things, it's a very valuable card. Sand in the Hourglass. I'm not super fond of this card, but I'll talk about it anyway. So, while fast, wound an enemy within range 1. Yay! All enemies that are wounded suffer 2 damage. Now with cascading reaction, this could actually be really powerful, but you basically need that. And then you swap light and dark, so that's just the thing. It's kind of like our side rider. Honestly, I've like hardly ever seen that even effectively. But like usually with like cascading reaction or certain classes, like I've seen like the Banner Spear wound enemies quite a bit. But there's actually one of the things you usually use wound against is against enemies that have shield. So this is a good X card, if only because you can use it against shielded enemies. Now, a lot of times it seems like, oh man, you can set up a bunch of wound and do a bunch of damage, but usually just straight up while fast, setting this up to burst enemies is just the better strategy. However, here's the next thing. If you do Blurry Jab or Cascading Reaction, targeting enemies with shield and then have to go slow next turn, consider using this as your slow action to do 2 direct damage to all those enemies that you wounded, or even 1 enemy while wounded, and it's 2 damage, not attack 2 damage. So if you wound them and then have to take a slow turn, this allows you to effectively break through shields. It's a very good slow top. I know the top half looked like it should be like, hey, well, fast you get to wound an enemy, and don't get me wrong, that's still useful, but while slow, it's just doesn't really suffer that much of a problem, especially if you used Cascading Reaction or Blurring Jab, or even an ally to set that up. So if you just check the scenario for shielded enemies, and the top half of that is pretty useful. The bottom half, however, still gets is pretty potent. Heal 2, all adjacent allies and self, which is very strong. The bottom half is heal 2, all adjacent allies and self, which is actually very strong, but doesn't give you any movement on either fast or slow. But if you do play the bottom while fast and burn another time token, you can then play another card immediately, which is neat, but a lot of times it's just hard to set that bottom up as much because you have to go fast, burn a time token, then burn the bottom of this on a time token. I'm not saying it's entirely useless, but you have to like burn this first and then burn another one. So I just haven't had the capacity to see this played to its full potential, but the top half is still very good against shielded enemies while you're going slow. I strongly suggest it. Borrowed Time. First off, this is a very interesting card. Initiative 2. Let's get excited about that a little bit. Or 32. 32 all slow is at least a pretty fast slow card, but for mostly we'll just talk about like the other effects. The bottom has a lot of words going on, but so does the top. So let's talk about the top first, which doesn't matter if you're fast or slow. You can drop it in anywhere. You'll probably be putting in a slow though. On your next 6 actions while slow, ignore all slow penalties, nice, and instead perform Mobilize 3, Range 3 instead at the end of the action. Notice this is next 6 actions. So sometimes people don't know what actions, abilities, attacks, and like attack actions, all these, like, so people get really kind of confused over that. So an action is just a half of a card. So next 6 actions. So if you, for example, put this into play and then like play a bottom half, you can use the bottom half, you can use this as a way to trigger boop and immobilize an enemy. Depends on like when you play this on your turn, whether how many charges get burnt. But then as you start to play, every time while slow, top half, boop, immobilize at range 3, bottom half, boop, immobilize. So you'll be able to toss out 2 immobilizes per turn at range 3 while slow at 2 different enemies. This can actually be really, really good. Now, of course, if you're long resting, you're not actually playing those, so just keep in mind you're not taking that all. Also, keep in mind it says ignore all slow effects. That also means ignore all bonuses from the slow side of cards. So like, you know, Blurry Jab has an attack 2 muddle, so that would not actually give you the muddle. So you have to tactically choose which cards do not have severe slow penalties for this. So it's not necessarily so amazing that you get all the slow bonuses and none of the slow penalties. You just don't get any of the slow effects, good or bad. Borrow Time on bottom is very interesting. All allies, while fast, all allies have -1 of their move abilities this round, and then move X, where X is twice your number of allies. This is really powerful in larger groups, or potentially if you have a Bone Shaper or Banner Spears dropping a summon, you could potentially do a lot of burst movement on this. Now, it is a little weird because you do kind of take their movement, so communicate it to where you're not actually screwing them over, because especially Bone Shapers, they have a lot of skeletons, dropping them to move 1 might actually really hurt their turn. On the other hand, the bottom of Borrowed Time, all slow, gives all allies +1 to their move abilities this round, but doesn't give you any movement. So, but if you're already in position, you could potentially give your allies a lot more movement. Plus 32 while slowed means you might be able to undercut some of them. This isn't the worst card, but I want to say the top half is actually very potent if you are pairing it with the correct cards to ignore most slow penalties, and the bottom has some application. Like I said, it's an X, so it does have some good uses. Despite that though, remember how I was talking about initiative undercuts and whatnot? This is a hard card not to take, if only because initiative 2 is one of your best undercuts in the whole game, period. So I know a lot of times people just look at the text of the card and value it for that, but initiative 2 is incredibly hard to undervalue, and initiative 32 is something you might want to consider for the slow side, but just a heads up. The initiative 2, and even just turning this to initiative 2, move 2, it has its own useful applications, especially if you pair it with something that you need to drop an enemy before they go, and you need to know you want to go before them. This is your tool. So that's a summary of all the level 1 cards. We're going to largely go over comparing all the level 2 cards and higher side by side. For the level 1 cards, this is generally what you're going to be probably taking to most scenarios. This isn't your default hand, and I don't like necessarily saying only pick these cards, but these are a good what you might be considering to bring to scenarios, and then always consider bringing your whole toolkit. Don't ignore cards. You have 13 cards available, use all 13 and bring the best for that scenario, because sometimes you're not going to need to multi-target, sometimes you're not going to need to pierce, sometimes you're not going to need to ignore retaliate, sometimes you're going to need to have that burst mobility. Read the scenario text, look at the monsters, and pick accordingly. So let's get into the higher level cards now. Alright, Reckless Augmentation versus Systems Reboot. Reckless Augmentation is an attack 3, so while slow, that's just all it is, attack 3. Could be worse. But the initiative 10, 40, fantastic. First off, love that. Initiative 10, fantastic. But while fast, Reckless Augmentation is an attack 5, Pierce 1, gain an experience, and take 1 damage. Attack 5, Pierce 1, non-loss at level 2 is ahead of the curve. It's a very strong card, especially if there's a very early craftable you get called Spyglass. You can take this, literally you can craft it after the first scenario if you get a very minimal amount of resources. And so by the time you hit level 2, you should be able to turn this into an attack 5, Pierce 1 advantage fairly reliably. That's a very strong card. It's what you want. The bottom half, on the other hand, is a move 3 and no penalty on slow. See, here's the thing. It's an attack 3, move 3 while slow, which isn't terrible, but all the fast payoffs are huge. All right, move 3, damage oneself, gain an experience, which sucks, but also ward self. Ward is not as good as you think it is, and brittle is far more powerful than you think it is. That's kind of the general gist. But that ward is probably only going to prevent a couple damage, so it's like a move 3, heal 1, like is kind of the payoff normally, and gain an experience. The initiative 10 does mean it's still pretty good. I'm not knocking the card, because at the very least, you take a damage, ward will prevent a damage, it'll at least pay off there. Move 3, gain an experience is like the worst it can do. So not knocking it, but the top is everything you want. That's fantastic. System Reboot, on the other hand, is wonderful, because it is a, first off, top loss with a good bottom. Heal 4 self, which is nice but it's a loss. But also get back one of your lost cards. It doesn't say lost cards for any level, it just says lost cards. So at level 2, Systems Reboot does give you trade a level 2 for a level 1, but while later levels, this could potentially give you the ability to get back some of your other cards, which is really good for some of the higher level losses. This will be more important for some of the other cards later, but if you do have a situational top loss, you need a good bottom that you can use reliably. First off, while fast, it's a move 4, which is, we always love move 4. So situational top, while fast, move 4, fantastic. All the initiative 57, 87 isn't necessarily as strong for the, it's good for fast. So while fast, it's while slow, it's a move 2 that then also says activate the fast effects instead of slow effects if you burn your time token. So that means you go slow to get a time token, and then you consume the time token to move 2 and then trigger the other fast side. There is one big catch on this, and that's the top part. This action can be performed while you have stun, and then also remove all negative conditions. First off, hey, remember what I was saying about power leak and removing poison? At the very least, this does say remove your poison, remove wound, remove everything. That's negative, so you don't remove strengthen. But since you can perform this while stunned, even while slow or fast, move 2, move 4, remove stun, and there are some really annoying stun enemies. This is great. The initiative isn't great on it though, so if you're trying to do this while fast to unstun yourself, you do need to pair this with clearly a faster card, but potentially you could have been caught stunned and just, I don't know. The bottom half, the slow part, the unstun is probably not something you're going to do as often, but the slow half of move 2, burn it to Do the fast half of another may be something you consider, but need to do the fast half of another in a pinch. This is something that's an option. In general, I'm going to suggest most people take Reckless Augmentation. I'm going to talk more about the slow blade at level 4, but you will be taking Systems Reboot. Don't take Systems Reboot. It is a solid card, but Reckless Augmentation just has more reliable payoffs, in my opinion. Level 3, you have Double Time versus Make It Count. Double Time is an attack 3, attack 2, and then while fast, you move 2 and gain an experience. Attack 3, attack 2, move 2 is great because if you've positioned yourself to be like right in front of an enemy, boom, boom, tap them twice, get out. Fantastic. While slow, it's actually just an attack 2, which really isn't that bad. The initiative of 2252 is pretty decent as well. It's not the best, but it's still good, especially for initiative weaving. 22 is not bad. A bottom loss, it says on your next 3 turns while fast, trigger all the fast effects twice. This can be really significant for burst things. Now, trigger all fast effects twice. That actually includes experience, as a heads up, but this is a loss with no experience, so yeah, it's kind of baked into it. So Double Time's bottom is something, remember how I was talking about tempo versus burst? If you need to have those on burst commands, the burst, that bottom is made for you. Anytime you be able to trigger, especially one of those that says like +1 attack on multiple attacks, being able to +1, +1, +1, +1 on like, so it turned like, oh, this is a couple attack 3s, it turns into a couple of attack 4s or 4s into 5s or things like that. This can add up very quickly to an insane amount of damage, and it's all 3 turns while fast, not like the borrowed time, which will say the next 6 actions. This is 3 turns while fast. You trigger them all twice. Now, I'd say a lot of people might be leaning on Double Time's top just because it's a very reliable top attack action, and if that's what you want to do, that's a good application of it. Let's talk about Make It Count now. Make It Count is a heal 1, range 3, target 3. Now here's the interesting part. That's a below the curve action for anything for level 3, so there's clearly a makeup, and here's what we have. Instead of range 3, target 3, for fast it's range 2, target 2, gaining experience, which sucks, but then also instead of heal 1, it's heal 3. So healing like a bunch of 3 people for 1 isn't great unless you're like removing wound and poison, in which case fantastic. But healing 2 people for 3, amazing. Also keep in mind, if you do this while Double Time, this is 1 heal 5 and 2 experience. So just a heads up, it's not. It clearly gets worse the fewer targets you take away. It clearly gets worse the more targets you take away. While slow, it doesn't get better, but you do bless yourself, which is better, which is amazing. Honestly, these are the kind of downtime turns. These are the downtime terms you want because you might be able to just heal off some wound, heal off some poison, or just do a little bit of healing and then bless yourself. That's a good top, especially between rooms. This is a very good filler action because a lot of classes figure out like, what am I doing while between rooms with my top action? I don't know what to do with my hands. This is what you do with it. The bottom half, on the other hand, is, hey, a bottom attack. It's an attack 2 that wounds while fast and muddles while slow, and you get to move 1 beforehand if you play this while fast. This is actually pretty strong because move 1, attack 2, wound is very strong for a non-loss bottom. Now, if it was a loss, that would be awful. You'd need clearly higher number than that, like a 5 or something, but anyway, move 1, attack 2, wound is still very strong, especially because you can use the top half, hit some things, and get out. There's a lot of applications you can use on that, especially if you do actually want to use Sand in the Hourglass to set up like Blurry Jab and then wound another thing, get out, Sand in the Hourglass, do 2 damage to both of them. This actually has a lot of potential there. Also, even then while slow, attack 2 Muddle is pretty strong if you need to use it for that. So obviously if you're going for burst, you do take Double Time, and I don't think it matters. I don't really have a preference for if you're playing tempo build, because Double Time is very similar to one of your level 1 cards, but better, and Make It Count still has very good application between turns. So if you do actually want to have more reliable turns, Make It Count's good, but Double Time's very good to replace one of your earlier cards. So that obviously does a good job there, and the slow build does take Make It Count as well. Level 4, you have Potential Energy versus Precision Timing. This is where the slow bait build gets very viable, but also not in the way you think. Precision timing is +1 to all attacks while slow and +1 to all moves while fast. +1 to all moves while fast, you typically have enough movement as is, so it doesn't pay off as 1. But +1 to all attacks while slow it's significant, and that's really what powers the slow blade is the adding +1 to everything, and this drastically changes the effects of the whole class, and it's basically the whole reason that triggers it. Potential energy, on the other hand, is pretty good for those slow interim turns because it's useless while fast. Ignore potential energy while fast. But precision timing, on the other hand, is very strong. If not for the bottom. Move 2, attack 2, gaining experience, move 2. While slow, it's move 2 and move 1. Initiative 15 is still pretty strong, so I do actually really like precision timing, but if only because the top half makes one build entirely viable. I don't personally think that most Blink Blades will use the top half of this. The bottom half still has a lot of universal applications that every Blink Blade will like. Potential energy is good because you don't want to have those dead turns while slow, so with potential energy it's an attack 3 or an attack 4 and gaining experience while slow. Attack 4 and gaining experience while slow is fantastic. It doesn't necessarily improve your fast turns, it makes your slow turns more effective, and the bottom half is a move 3 or 4 while slow, potentially more if you build up enough tokens. Like, you can potentially build this up to move 7 or attack 7, but those are more like very rare situations that you're probably not going to end up seeing very often. Most builds are going to end up just picking either precision timing or potential energy, depending on what you want to do. I personally think if you're going tempo, potential energy, or you can go back and pick up double time if you actually were struggling at that level. But keep in mind, if you actually are using double time, that's actually really significant. So obviously precision timing is something we're going to lean on for that. But personally, if you're kind of going for more of a tempo build, potential energy is probably better for tempo overall, but precision timing or going back and picking double time are also good options. Slow Blade obviously picks precision timing for the top. Breakneck speed. At the start of the next 4 rounds, during which you are not performing a long rest, suffer 2 damage and play 3 cards instead of 2, using 1 card as the initiative, and at least 1 top and bottom must be performed. At the 2nd and 4th turn, you gain an experience. It's actually really nice that they give you the ability to say, well, not long rest, so you can still like long rest, and do those 4. Now the problem is, like, how do you get like enough time tokens during this to play it effectively? So you can like put this into play during a slow turn, get up to 2, play 2 turns in a row, then long rest, get 1 of those back, and then hopefully during that either use an AMD or possibly start earlier with like drive recharge or something else that gets you not starting at 2 but starting at 3. Breakneck speed does have some potential. You do suffer a bit of damage during this, but playing 3 cards, especially like basically a lot of times you're going to be using this to play 2 tops, especially when you pair this with double time. And I want to emphasize this, double time does not like do what borrowed time does. Borrowed time says during your next 6 actions, double time says during your next 3 turns. So what you want to do is probably not long rest. This is where you set it up to where you want to breakneck and double time and get it to where you are going to do 3 giant bursts of damage in a couple. The amount of attacks you can make is insane, largely because, and we're going to be going over through some of the other cards that we are going to be drawing later, but even then earlier, imagine being able to play like some of those early attacks, playing 2 top halves during the turn, playing like one of those bottom attack 3s, and then being able to do like, for example, attack 4, attack 3, attack 3, attack 3, attack 3. That's too much, especially because there are so many of the modifiers in the Blink Blades deck that go to +2s. Toss in a Strengthen on there and watch this character just be able to burst out so much damage. This is one of the core cards for that. Now, it's a teleport 5 on bottom. Oh, initiative 3, first off, is fantastic. Initiative 3, teleport 5. While fast, there's no other things. It's just teleport 5, initiative 3. While slow, it's initiative 33, teleport 5, damage 2 self. So it's a little bit harder to use there, but still, that's really good. Flashing Flurry, on the other hand, there's another. This is another really strong card. Attack 3, and then consume any element, and you have the ability to create several elements, so you can potentially use this. Attack 3 or attack 4, and while fast, it's actually a ranged attack. So target 2 enemies at range 3, while slow, it's actually only an attack 2, but you sweep 2 enemies. You know, that's pretty significant. But you do generally need an element to set that up to be particularly effective, because you will be able to target 2 things, so the difference between +1 attack on 1 thing and +1 attack on 2 things is notable. The bottom half is a situational loss. So initiative 40, initiative 70 isn't necessarily my favorite, but the bottom, stun every adjacent enemy. Whew! That's huge. That's big. But then you gain a time token for every enemy that you targeted with this. And that can really set up a big thing, especially if you're surrounded by enemies. Stun them all and then gain a shit ton of time tokens. Just go fast, 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 like Sonic, I guess. If you're going tempo, Flashing Flurry is a particularly good option. Breakneck Speed also, you could take it anyway. Teleport 5 at Initiative 3 is very difficult to turn down. Plus, you do have the ability to do some burst if you want to. Obviously, if you're playing burst, you take Breakneck Speed. There's really no discussion. This has the potential to constantly do the most damage in a single turn, which is kind of your goal. You want to set the record and show off, because that's what you do as a burst person. But if you're going slow, I personally lean towards Flashing Flurry, if not because with an element, Flashing Flurry does give you a couple of attack 4s while slow, and that's kind of what you're going for in the first place. So if you're going the slow build, since a lot of what you do all fast, you might actually consider Flashing Flurry, because if you take the top, even though you don't get the +1 thing due to precision timing, or even just melee them, and if you do have the elements, you can do a couple of attack 4s. Or if you are ignoring the slow penalties, you can make that to where it is, oops, sorry. Or if you are playing under ignoring slow penalties, attack 5s while slow on enemies, which is kind of that's a lot of damage. Stab Them All versus Knife's Edge. Stab Them All is attack 2, attack 2, attack 1, and gain an experience. While fast, you move 2 between those attacks, which is significant. Initiative 4 versus 34. 4 is a really good initiative. The bottom half is a cool thing. Move 3 while fast, or ward self while slow, gives you a couple of setups, and then anytime an enemy who isn't adjacent to you moves adjacent to you, you get a free attack 2 on them, which can actually add up to a lot, especially with your attack modifier deck. Target the enemy, attack 2. This adds up to a lot and actually is a very powerful card. Knife's Edge, however, is also a powerful card. It's just an attack 3 wound with a bunch of other stuff. While slow, you also damage oneself, which isn't great. But while fast, you target all adjacent enemies. Attack 3 wound, target all adjacent enemies. But then you also suffer 1 damage for every enemy you targeted with this ability. That's kind of problematic. But hey, that's a lot of burst damage right there. Heal 4 self, and then if you're fast, move 2 on bottom. And the initiative is 65-95. Knife's Edge is kind of bad while fast because you have to pair it with a bottom, but you have the ability to do that, and I'm not calling it bad. The initiative's bad while fast. It's a very good card. I just want to point out, Slow Blade, we're going to talk about that for a second. Stab Them All is fantastic because with precision timing, that's attack 3, attack 3, attack 2, 1 experience. That's a lot, especially with your attack modifier deck, and I say that a lot, but you'll compare this to some of the other classes, and I like to see all the other +2s out of this. So yeah, Stab Them All is obviously what we pick as a Slow Blade. For tempo, we're going to just lean towards Knife's Edge because first off, being able to move and heal is very good for recovery. It's very good just for keeping yourself going, and then on burst you can do a shit ton of damage, which is really good. But comparing both of these cards for the burst build, this doesn't necessarily make any of these cards better while bursty. For example, under double time breakneck speed, you're not actually getting more damage, you're just either getting more mobility, and this isn't what you want during that. So for the burst build, if you really do want to do burst, I strongly consider going back and getting the flurry, because the flurry giving you the ability to pump out. At the very least, the worst case scenario is you toss this out while under the effect of breakneck speed and double time. You get to target 3 different. Breakneck speed is something you needed to take at that level just to get that effect out. But as one of your 3 cards played that turn, you can Flashing Flurry to target 3 different enemies, not 2, 3 different enemies with an attack 3 at range 4 or 5, range 5, and 2 experience. So breakneck speed, double time, plus flashing flurry is a shit ton of damage, and then you still have 2 other cards to play that turn, which is huge. Phasing Blades versus Rush to the End at level 7. Phasing Blades is a loss that says add Pierce 3 to all attacks, which is huge because shielded enemies are annoying. Of course, it's situational, so if we have a situational top, it better have a pretty good bottom. 63-93 on initiatives, good for slow, for weaving. Move 4, nice. And then move 3 if you're going slow. So move 4 or 3, and then if you end this movement adjacent to 3 or more enemies, gain a time token. That's actually universally pretty good, especially if you need to call upon getting more time tokens. You could surround yourself by a bunch of enemies, especially if you're fast. You can probably use the top half's movement to get the hell out of there. Rush to the End, on the other hand, is an attack 4. First off, initiative 32 to 62. 32 is not bad. There's better options though. But attack 4, or while fast, attack 5, gain an experience, and then you can burst out the a tempo token to make this an attack 8. That's, first off, that's a lot. But also, even then, while slow, you can burn a tempo to get attack 7 and gain an experience. That's a lot. Rush to the End's bottom is a grant 1 ally within range 2, move 4, or while slow, move 6. Then the bottom is a move 4, or if you're slow, move 2. So here's the funny part. While fast, it's grant an ally move 4, and then you move 4. While slow, it's grant an ally move 6, and then you move 2. That's huge. I do love that, but it's kind of conditional, because granting an ally move 4, move 6 is not necessarily something you can necessarily pay off, but in certain groups it'll obviously be pretty strong. I generally lean towards Phasing Blades because move 4, move 3 that can potentially give you more time tokens is something that you can use. So if you're going for tempo, I'd say Phasing Blades is the default, and if you're going slow, you go for Rush to the End. You don't actually want to burn too many of your time tokens as the burst class, so Phasing Blades, a lot of times since you're going to be doing burst damage, Phasing Blades top. If you're fighting enemies that have lots of shield, the last thing you want to do is do a shit ton of attacks against them and then have it fall against their shield, so you take that as well. Level 8, we have Fastest Alive versus Quantum Uncertainty. Fastest Alive, Initiative 1 or 31. Initiative 1, Fastest Alive, I mean. So this is the card that turns you into Sonic, I guess. You become Sonic the Hedgehog for the rest of the scenario. You turn blue and get red sneakers, I don't know. Fastest Alive, Attack 2, Target 3 Muddle. Not bad start and gain an experience. While fast, you get +2 to all attacks targeting enemies with Immobilize or who has revealed ability cards have no move abilities. So, you know we had that level 1 card where you mobilize all those adjacent enemies. Well, guess what? You can always set yourself up, move fast, get into position, drop that on them with Fastest Alive. You will go before them because there's no way enemies can go faster than this. And then with double time and breakneck speed, you can still play another card with this, but this one gets that twice. So it's attack 6, target 3, muddle all those enemies. Attack 6, target 3 is kind of busted. So by the way, if you're doing the burst build, you're taking Fastest Alive, period. It's a move 4 while slow or a move 8 non-loss while fast. So Fastest Alive, non-loss move 8, I think it's aptly earned its name. The other card, on the other hand, is Quantum Uncertainty, which is an attack 5, which says that any crit you draw is a null. This includes also blesses. And on the other hand is for fast, any nulls you draw, including curses, count as crits instead. For certain scenarios, this is actually insane. For just doubling your crits and making this crit immune in the most fun way possible is amazing. But also an attack 5, all this actually gives you all the control you want. So by the way, if you're going tempo, you're picking Quantum Uncertainty, just as a heads up. But 35-65 isn't necessarily what you're going for initiative, but there's better options. We have plenty you can pair it with by this level. while you're going slow, you move 2, strengthen self, and while going fast, move 3, invis self. So Slow Blade's going to pick Quantum Uncertainty because move 2, strengthen self, combined with all the +1 attacks and all the other options you have, really adds up. So Quantum Uncertainty is very fantastic for that, and the Tempo build also goes for that. Burst also goes for Fastest Alive. By the way, if you were going for Tempo, you could still go for Fastest Alive as well. It's not bad. Quantum Uncertainty just gives you, first off, move 3 invis self is just hard to turn down, given how strong Invisible is, and the top half gives you an attack that is guaranteed to land. Level 9, Fractured Timeline versus Reverse the Flow. Fractured Timeline's initiative is 55 versus 85, and the bottom has very little text and the top has a lot of text. So first off, the bottom is a teleport 7 while fast. That's ridiculous. And while slow, it causes you to take 2 damage, but you still get the teleport 7, which is huge. But it's a loss. You spawn a monster with a blue base, nice, and an adjacent empty hex that is identical to a normal adjacent enemy. So you just take this guy and put it here. You get your own friend. It has the current hit point value and all its conditions, and it's an ally to you and an enemy to all other monsters, and it uses your attack modifier deck. Okay, it's so strange to copy a normal monster. There's certain enemies that this is going to be completely busted against, especially against those annoying enemies that inflict Bane. I'm not going to talk about those Living Dooms so much because they're super annoying, but like, seriously, there's some really busted enemies you can use this on. Reverse the Flow. This round, you may perform move abilities as attack abilities of equal value. Then also, you can play a discard out of your discard pile for the bottom action. That can actually be really powerful for, like, for example, Fastest Alive. You can just put it into play while fast and perform an attack 8 and then take another one. Oh gosh, it's so insane. So, the bottom half of Reverse the Flow is a loss, teleport to a starting hex, heal 10 self, recover 2 lost cards. Reverse the Flow, that's like, this is like that Tracer ability from Overwatch, if you played that. Although I'm not a big fan of Blizzard anymore, but hey, that game's pretty neat, right? People still play it? I think, maybe. Anyway, very similar to that. Just a complete restart. You teleport to a starting hex, get some 2 lost cards back, and heal 10 self, which is kind of hard to bitch about. The top half of this is, first off, just very strong, just because even at level 9, and knowing that you're going to be doing this, you could potentially burst out a lot of damage with 2 very big moves by just recovering a very good move, playing that big move, and then also playing another big move with the bottom half of this. So if you're going burst, obviously what I was just saying, Reverse the Flow. Reverse the Flow can, if you set it up correctly, you can just play 3 cards, Reverse the Flow gets 2 really high movements, you can attack 8, and then just play another thing. And even then, when you have those cards that say, like, perform like these moves in between the attacks, turning all those into attacks is huge. So if you're playing double time breakneck speed, Reverse the Flow can turn those into insane cards as well. So Reverse the Flow, recover one of your moves, play it immediately for a big move, and then play bottom move, and then play another top. The amount of damage you can actually punch out with this is fairly ridiculous. So you obviously take Reverse the Flow. Of course, if you don't have those cards in play, it doesn't have as big a payoff, so most everyone's going to take Fractured Timeline. It's just really hard to bitch about a teleport 7, and then once you're done teleporting around, in the last scenario, just copy one of the enemies and then make that last room a lot easier. Even then, it gives you something else that they can attack. So, yeah, that's Fractured Timeline. Also, Slow Blade picks Fractured Timeline as well. It's just really hard for them to make good use out of Reverse the Flow. And it's perk time. The first thing you want to remove is the -2, and then it kind of varies from build to build, but here's the order we're going to be taking them in. Mobilize immunity is very strong, and then the rolling +2s are actually really strong because removing 0s means that you're going to be drawing all cards more often, but also getting the random +2s will even mitigate some of the other. There's a lot of damage output and makes your deck more reliable. Additionally, after that, I start removing the -1s because those are the worst parts. After we've gotten all the -1s out, let's start adding the +2s, which is, I think, +2 regenerate self-rolling. Those are really, really powerful, and that's largely where we go from there. After this point, it kind of varies a little bit, but you can start like swapping the +1s for +2s and doing. It's a little bit more open here because the +1s to +2s are, first off, incredibly significant, but for the most part, adding all those rolling +2s and getting rid of all your -1s with +1s means that and adding the other rolling +2 regenerates. It means your deck is generally pretty reliably high burst anyway, that this is only going to make a difference of a couple of attack 1s turning into attack 2s during the course of the scenario. So I don't prioritize it as much as I prioritize getting rid of those negatives, plus some of the other things you can do to remove to turn those negatives into +1s or +0 wounds are really strong. The only thing I want to add is the add 1 -1 gain a time token card is useless for the slow blade build, and never take that under any circumstance. So that's it. So that's the Blink Blade. So I know that was a lot, but I hope it was very helpful. I know this class, every card feels like it's every level, instead of going over 2 cards, it feels like you're going over 4 cards. There's just so much going on. So I'm going to be posting a link to all the build options in the description. So if you want to refer to them later without having to scroll through the video, you just go ahead and click the links there. Additionally, we actually will be going back to doing some luck classes shortly, and we'll be doing more guides over the course for Frosthaven over the course of this year. It should be amazing. So if this helps you, be sure to like. If you got this far, please hit like, because this is such a long video, and thank you so much for paying attention to this point. So I just want to thank all of you. Thank you for watching, and thank all of my patrons. You guys are fantastic, and thanks to everyone who joined in December. That was wonderful, and all of you are particularly wonderful people, and it's just been nice. I've been more active in Discord, so it's been very good interacting with all of you, and it's been amazing. So if you do want to join the Discord, consider doing so. I'll have a link in the description as well. So thank all of you for supporting the channel, and thanks all of you for watching.